The locomotive's whistle pierced the desert air like a lonesome coyote's cry, its black smoke rising against the merciless blue sky. Clara Whitfield pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the endless expanse of red earth and scattered sagebrush roll past. Each mile took her farther from Boston's cobblestone streets and closer to a future she'd chosen with her mind, not her heart. Inside her leather trunk, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, lay the white satin wedding dress her mother had worn 30 years ago. The delicate lace had yellowed slightly with age, but Clara had spent weeks restoring it to pristine condition. It was to be her armor, her transformation from a poor seamstress's daughter into Mrs. Albert Harrington, wife of Silver Rock's most prosperous banker. She touched the letter in her reticule again, though she'd memorized every word. Albert's penmanship was as precise as his ledgers. My dear Miss Whitfield, I believe we shall make a most advantageous match. Silver Rock needs a woman of your refinement, and I can provide the security and position you deserve. Security, position. The words should have comforted her, yet they sat heavy as stones in her stomach. The train car swayed, and dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Around her, passengers dozed or read, their faces etched with the weariness of long travel. A mother hushed her crying infant, while two businessmen discussed cattle prices in low voices. Clara envied their sense of purpose, their certainty about where they belonged. She closed her eyes, remembering the cramped apartment above her mother's shop, the endless nights spent mending other women's fine clothes by candlelight, the whispers that followed her through Boston's better neighborhoods. That's the Whitfield girl. Pretty enough, but not a penny for a dowry. The suitors who'd called briefly, then vanished when they learned of her circumstances. Albert had been different. He'd come to her mother's shop to commission shirts, staying to discuss books and politics while Clara took his measurements. He never looked at her the way other men did, with hunger tempered by calculation. His proposal had been a business proposition, honest in its practicality. I need a wife who can hold her own in society. You need a husband who values intelligence over inheritance. We understand each other. Miss Whitfield. The train began to slow, and the conductor's voice rang out. Willow Springs Station, 30-minute stop for water and coal. Clara gathered her traveling cloak, grateful for the chance to stretch her legs. The small depot materialized from the heat shimmer, little more than a water tower, a few weathered buildings, and a corral where horses stamped and snorted in the dust. The moment she stepped onto the platform, the desert heat struck her like a physical blow. It was nothing like Boston's humid summers. This heat was dry, searing, pulling moisture from her skin and leaving her lips parched within seconds. The wind carried a grit that stung her eyes and found its way into every fold of her clothing. Ma'am, you'll want to stay close to the station, the conductor warned. This ain't no place for a lady to wander. Clara nodded, but found herself drawn to the edge of the platform, staring out at the vast emptiness. The landscape was beautiful in its desolation. Red rocks twisted into fantastic shapes, distant mesas purple against the horizon, and everywhere the sense of something wild and untamed that made her chest tight with an emotion she couldn't name. First time in the territories? A woman's voice made her turn. The speaker was perhaps 40, her face weathered but kind, wearing a practical brown dress and sturdy boots. Yes, Clara admitted. I'm traveling to Silver Rock. The woman's eyes flicked to Clara's fine traveling costume, the obvious quality of her gloves and boots. Marriage? Heat rose in Clara's cheeks. Is it so obvious? Only a fool or a bride would come to Silver Rock in silk and lace. The woman's smile softened her words. I'm Mrs. Sarah Morrison, run the boarding house in Willow Springs. My husband drove freight between here and Silver Rock for 20 years before the consumption took him. I'm sorry for your loss. Mrs. Morrison shrugged. The desert takes as much as it gives. You're intended, he's expecting you. Yes, Mr. Albert Harrington. Perhaps you know him? Something flickered in the older woman's eyes. The banker. Yes, I know of him. Rich as Croesus, they say. You'll want for nothing. She paused, studying Clara's face. Nothing material, anyway. Before Clara could ask what she meant, the whistle blew again. She bid Mrs. Morrison farewell and returned to her seat. But the woman's words echoed in her mind as the train resumed its journey west. The landscape grew more severe as afternoon melted toward evening. Gone were the last traces of grass and scattered homesteads. Now there was only rock and sand, punctuated by strange cacti that raised their arms to the sky like supplicants. The mountains loomed closer, their peaks tinged red in the slanting light. Clara tried to imagine herself in this place, presiding over Albert's household, hosting dinner parties for Silver Rock's elite. Would she learn to love the desert's harsh beauty? Would she grow accustomed to the isolation, the vast distances between souls? Her mother had wept when Clara told her of the engagement. "You're running away," she'd accused. "Running from poverty. Yes, but what are you running toward?" "A life where I'm not pitied," Clara had replied, "where I can hold my head high." And love? What of love? Clara had turned away, unable to meet her mother's eyes. Love is a luxury I cannot afford. Now, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of flame and shadow, she wondered if she'd spoken the truth. Was love truly a luxury, or was it like water in this parched land, something essential, something worth any hardship to find? The train's rhythm lulled her into a dozed state. Neither sleeping nor fully awake, she dreamed of Boston rain, of her mother's gentle hands, of a life where she might have married for love if she'd been born to different circumstances. When she woke, stars had begun to appear in the darkening sky, more stars than she'd ever seen through Boston's smoke and fog. Tomorrow she would reach Silver Rock. Tomorrow she would meet Albert again, begin the process of becoming Mrs. Harrington. Tonight, she was still Clara Whitfield, suspended between two worlds, carrying nothing but hope and a wedding dress that had already seen one woman's dreams. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the window, beautiful and terrifying in its vastness. Somewhere out there, creatures hunted and hid, survived and perished according to laws older than civilization. It was a world that cared nothing for silk dresses or bank accounts, where strength was measured differently than in the drawing rooms of Boston. Clara pulled her cloak tighter, though the night was still warm. She'd chosen her path with open eyes, traded the familiar constraints of poverty for the unknown possibilities of the frontier. Whether she'd find paradise or prison in Silver Rock remained to be seen. The train rolled on through the darkness, carrying her toward a future as vast and uncertain as the desert itself. The stagecoach lurched over another rut, throwing Clara against the wooden side panel. She'd hired the coach at the last train stop, along with 3 other passengers, a traveling merchant named Mr. Cornelius Webb and an elderly couple, the Parkers, heading to their son's ranch. The driver, a grizzled man called Jake, had assured them the journey to Silver Rock would take only 6 hours. That was before the gunshots. The first crack split the desert air like lightning, followed immediately by Jake's shout, "Bandits! Everyone down!" Clara's heart hammered as she ducked below the window. Through the gaps in the coach's construction, she could see riders approaching fast, bandanas covering their faces, rifles raised. "Mister!" Webb fumbled for a small pistol with shaking hands, while Mrs. Parker began to pray in a trembling voice. Another shot rang out, and the coach jerked to a violent stop. Clara heard Jake curse, then a thud as something, or someone, hit the ground. "Everyone out," a rough voice commanded. "Hands where we can see them." Clara emerged on unsteady legs, her traveling dress catching on the coach door. 3 bandits circled them like wolves, their horses dancing in the dust. The leader, a man with cold gray eyes above his bandana, gestured with his rifle. "Valuables in the dirt, now." "Mister." Webb threw down his money pouch with a whimper. "Mister." Parker moved to shield his wife, tossing his pocket watch at the bandit's feet. Clara's hands trembled as she reached for her reticule, thinking of Albert's letter, her mother's cameo brooch, the only valuable thing she owned. "The lady's taking her time," the leader sneered, spurring his horse closer. Maybe she needs help. He reached down, and Clara instinctively stepped back, her heel catching on a rock. As she stumbled, a new sound cut through the tension, the sharp whistle of a bullet passing overhead, followed by the crack of a rifle. The bandits' horses reared. From behind a cluster of red rocks emerged a lone rider, his duster coat billowing, face shadowed by a worn hat. He held his rifle steady, aimed at the leader. 3 against 1 ain't sporting odds, the newcomer said, his voice carrying despite the distance. How about you boys collect what you've got and ride on? The bandit leader laughed. And who's going to make us? You, if need be. The rider's tone remained conversational, almost lazy, but Clara noticed how his hands never wavered on the rifle. What happened next occurred so fast Clara could barely follow. The leader went for his pistol, but the stranger's rifle spoke first, sending the gun spinning from the bandit's hand. The other 2 outlaws raised their weapons, but 2 more precise shots sent their horses dancing backward, spooked but unharmed. Next ones won't be warnings, the stranger said. The leader clutched his bleeding hand, rage burning in his eyes. For a moment, Clara thought he might charge anyway. Then he spat in the dirt and wheeled his horse around. This ain't over, Dust! The 3 bandits galloped away, leaving nothing but settling dust and Clara's scattered belongings. The stranger, Dust, the bandit had called him, rode closer, dismounting with fluid grace. Up close, Clara could see his face properly, sun-weathered and unshaven, with eyes the color of sage honey and lines that spoke of too many days squinting into the desert sun. He couldn't have been more than 30, but something in his bearing suggested years of hard living. Anyone hurt? He asked, already kneeling beside Jake, who was struggling to sit up, blood seeping from a graze on his temple. Just my pride. Jake groaned. And my head. Damn fool winged me. Dust produced a canteen and a relatively clean bandana, tending to the wound with surprising gentleness. You'll live. Head wounds bleed like stuck pigs, but look worse than they are. Clara found herself studying this unexpected savior. His clothes were practical worn leather chaps, a shirt that had seen better days, boots scarred by countless miles. A Colt revolver rode his hip, and his rifle bore the marks of hard use but careful maintenance. Everything about him spoke of a man who lived outside the boundaries of civilization. We're in your debt, sir. Mister, Parker said, helping his wife back into the coach. Might we know the name of our rescuer? James McCall, Dust replied, securing the bandage around Jake's head. Though most call me Dust. On account of you appearing from nowhere like a dust devil? Jake asked with a weak grin. On account of that being about all I own, dust and distance. He turned to Clara, touching his hat brim. Ma'am, you dropped these. He held out her scattered belongings, the letter, her brooch, a small daguerreotype of her mother. Their fingers brushed as she took them, and she felt an unexpected jolt, like static electricity before a storm. Thank you, Mr. McCall. Just Dust, ma'am. His eyes lingered on her face a moment longer than propriety allowed. You folks heading to Silver Rock? We are, Clara confirmed. Do you know it? Something shifted in his expression. I know it. Know the kind of men who run it, too. He glanced at her fine dress, the obvious quality of her belongings despite their dusty state. You got people there? My fiancé, Mr. Albert Harrington. Dust's face went carefully neutral. The banker. You know him? Know of him. Dust stood, brushing dust from his chaps. Jake, you good to drive? I'll manage. Then I'll ride along, make sure those boys don't double back. Desert's full of ambush spots between here and town. Clara wanted to protest that they couldn't impose further, but the memory of those cold eyes above the bandana stopped her. She'd read about Western violence in newspapers, but experiencing it firsthand left her shaken to her core. They resumed their journey with Dust riding alongside, his presence both reassuring and unsettling. Clara found herself watching him through the coach window, the easy way he sat his horse, the constant vigilance in his scanning of the horizon. the economical grace of his movements. Known Dust near 3 years. Jake called back to them. Never seen him miss what he aims at. You folks were lucky he was passing through, or following. Mister, Webb muttered darkly. How do we know he's not with them? Because you still have your valuables. Mrs., Parker said sharply. Show some gratitude. Mr. Webb. Clara silently agreed. Whatever else Dust might be, he wasn't aligned with those bandits. The leader's recognition had carried too much animosity for that. As they traveled, the landscape began to change. The open desert gave way to more broken country, deep arroyos, towering rock formations, places where a dozen men could hide. Dust never relaxed his vigilance, occasionally dismounting to scout ahead on foot. During one such stop while he was checking a narrow pass, Mr. Parker leaned toward Clara. That's a dangerous man. Miss, the kind best appreciated from a distance. He saved us, Clara pointed out. Yes, and I'm grateful. But men like that, they live by the gun. It's written all over him. Clara thought about the gentleness with which Dust had tended Jake's wound, the careful way he'd returned her belongings. Dangerous. Yes, but dangerous to whom? When Dust returned, he brought troubling news. Fresh tracks in the pass. Might be nothing. Might be our friends from earlier. There's another route, longer but safer. Add 2 hours to your journey. 2 hours? Mr. Webb groaned. I have business in Silver Rock. Better late than late. Dust said flatly. Your choice, Jake. Jake didn't hesitate. We go around. The detour took them through a landscape that seemed torn from the Earth's fever dreams. Red rocks twisted into impossible shapes. Wind-carved arches that framed the endless sky. Narrow canyons where their voices echoed like ghost whispers. Clara forgot her fear and wonder at the terrible beauty surrounding them. First time in the territories? Dust had ridden closer to the coach, perhaps sensing her amazement. Yes, it's overwhelming. Deserts like that makes you feel small. He gazed out at the vastness. Some folks can't stand it, others find peace in it. Which are you? He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, revealing the younger man beneath the hard edges. Still figuring that out, ma'am? Clara, she said impulsively. My name is Clara. Miss Clara. He tested the name like he was tasting something new. From back east? Boston? Long way from home. I suppose Silver Rock will be home now. Something flickered in his eyes. Concern? Warning? Silver Rock's a hard place. Miss Clara makes its own rules. Man like Harrington knows how to use those rules. You speak as though you know him personally. Our paths have crossed. His tone suggested those crossings hadn't been pleasant. He gets what he wants, generally speaking. And what's wrong with a man who knows his mind? Dust studied her for a long moment. Nothing, long as what he wants doesn't come at too high a cost to others. Before Clara could ask what he meant, Jake called out that they were approaching the main road to Silver Rock. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of copper and gold. I'll leave you here, Dust announced. Town's just over that rise. You'll make it before full dark. Won't you come with us? Clara surprised herself by asking, You've done so much. Surely we can offer you a meal, a room for the night. His smile was rueful. Appreciate the thought. But Silver Rock and I have an understanding. I don't darken its doorstep, and it doesn't try to put a rope around my neck. You're wanted? Not specifically, but men like me make folks nervous. Rather sleep under stars than behind bars. He touched his hat to all of them, his eyes lingering on Clara. You take care. Miss Clara. Desert's got all kinds of predators, and not all of them go on 4 legs. Then he was gone, disappearing into the gathering shadows like smoke, leaving Clara to wonder why his warning felt more like a prophecy. The sandstorm struck without warning. One moment, Clara was dozing fitfully in the coach as they navigated a narrow canyon. The next, Jake was shouting curses as a wall of red dust engulfed them, turning day to twilight. The horses screamed. rearing in their traces as sand blasted against their flanks. "Everyone out!" Jake bellowed over the wind's howl. "We need to find shelter." Clara stumbled from the coach, immediately blinded by flying grit. The wind hit her like a living thing, trying to tear her clothes, steal her breath. She heard Mrs. Parker crying out, "Mister!" Webb cursing, but could see nothing through the crimson veil. A hand gripped her arm, strong, steady, familiar though she'd known its owner mere hours. "This way!" Dust's voice cut through the chaos. He'd returned, appearing like his namesake from the storm itself. "Can't see, mister," Parker shouted. "Form a line! Hold on to each other!" Dust commanded. Clara felt him position her hand on his belt, then heard him directing the others to link up behind her. "Jake, help me with the horses!" They struggled forward, bent against the wind's fury. Sand found every gap in Clara's clothing, filling her nose and mouth, turning her tears to mud on her cheeks. Just when she thought she couldn't take another step, Dust pulled them into relative calm. They were in a deep cleft in the rock, barely wide enough for their group but blessed shelter from the storm's rage. Outside, the wind shrieked like all the demons of hell set loose. "The horses?" Clara asked, coughing. "Jake's securing them in a side canyon. They'll weather it." Dust was already gathering scrub brush and dried wood from crevices in the rock. "We need fire. This could last hours." Clara helped him, grateful for something to do. The others huddled together. Mr. Webb muttering prayers he'd probably forgotten he knew. Soon, Dust had a small fire crackling, its smoke drawn up through gaps in the rock above. "Thought you were heading away from Silver Rock," Clara said as they settled around the meager warmth. Storm changed my mind." He pulled out his canteen, taking a small sip before passing it to her. "Saw it building. Figured you folks might need help. Lucky for us." "Mister," Parker said. "We'd have been buried out there." Dust shook his head. "Not luck. Desert gives warnings if you know how to read them. Pressure drop. Way the lizards were acting. Clouds building over the mountains." He glanced at Clara. "Out here, you learn to pay attention or you don't last long." Jake stumbled in, coated head to toe in red dust. "Horses are as secure as I can make them. This is a bad one." They settled in to wait, the fire casting dancing shadows on the rock walls. Outside, the storm raged on, sometimes seeming to ease only to return with doubled fury. "I was caught in a storm like this once," Dust said, perhaps sensing their need for distraction. 3 days in a cave no bigger than a coffin, nothing but my horse and a half-empty canteen. Started seeing things by the second day. My mother, dead 10 years. My brother, shot down in Tucson. Desert plays tricks when it gets in your head." "How did you survive?" Clara asked. "Same way anyone survives out here. Stubbornness." He poked the fire, sending sparks spiraling. "And maybe not having anywhere else to go." "No home?" Mrs. Parker asked gently. "Had one once. Little spread up in Colorado. Lost it to a cattle baron who wanted my water rights. Judge said my deed wasn't valid. Amazing how that happens when the other fellow owns the judge." Clara thought of Albert, his letters describing his influence in Silver Rock. How many men like Dust had been pushed aside by men like her fiancé? "So you chose this life?" she asked. "Didn't feel like much of a choice at the time. Man takes what you built with your own hands. You got 2 options, fight and likely die, or drift and stay free." His eyes met hers across the fire. "I chose freedom. Not sure some days if that makes me smart or a coward." "You're no coward," Jake said firmly. "Seen you face down 5 men to protect a water hole for settlers? That ain't cowardice." "That was different. They had kids." Clara studied him in the firelight. Each story revealed another layer, not just a drifter or gunman, but a man shaped by loss and injustice, choosing isolation over compromise. She thought of her own choices, marrying for security rather than love, and wondered who was truly the coward. The storm's voice changed, becoming less shriek and more moan. Dust tilted his head, listening. "It's passing. Another hour, maybe 2. Thank the Lord. Mister, Webb muttered. I thought we'd die in this godforsaken place. Desert's not forsaken, Dust said quietly. Just indifferent. Doesn't care about your money or your plans or your dreams. Treats everyone the same, honest in its way. Clara pulled her cloak tighter, shivering despite the fire. Without a word. Dust shrugged out of his duster and draped it around her shoulders. It smelled of leather and sage, horse and gunpowder, the essence of this wild country distilled into fabric. I can't take your coat, she protested. I'm used to the cold. You're not. He settled back against the rock wall. Besides, can't have Harrington's bride catching her death. He'd probably find a way to blame me for it. You really don't like him. I don't like men who measure everything by what it's worth to them. Land, cattle, people, all just numbers in his ledger. You don't know him, Clara said, though without much conviction. Maybe not, but I know his type. Dust's voice carried an old bitterness. Men who've never gone hungry, never had to choose between pride and survival. They look at someone like me and see failure, worthlessness. Look at someone like you and see... He stopped, jaw tightening. See what? Clara pressed. An acquisition, something beautiful to own. Display. Add to their collection of valuable things. Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. That's presumptuous. Maybe. Hope I'm wrong. He met her eyes steadily. You deserve better than being someone's prize, Miss Clara. The moment stretched between them, charged as the air before lightning. Clara felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of bonds she'd wrapped tight around her heart. This man, this drifter, who owned nothing but dust and distance, saw her more clearly than anyone in Boston society ever had. Tell me about the stars, she said, needing to break the tension. In your travels, under the open sky. His face softened. Out here, with no city lights, it's like looking into eternity. Stars so thick you could walk on them. Sometimes I lay on my bedroll and try to count them, but it's like counting grains of sand, makes a man feel small and infinite all at once. I saw them from the train. I've never seen so many. That's just the beginning. Wait until you're truly alone out here. Nothing but you and the sky. Some say it drives men mad. All that emptiness. But to me, it's like finally being able to breathe after years of suffocation. They talked on as the storm gradually died outside. Dust spoke of places he'd seen, hidden springs where wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion, ancient ruins of peoples long vanished, canyons so deep and narrow the sun only touched their floors at midday. Clara found herself sharing too. Her mother's struggle to keep the shop, the shame of mended gloves and turned dresses, the weight of others' pity. Sounds like we both know about losing things, Dust said. Difference is, you're trying to build something new. I just keep running. Is that what you're doing? Running? He considered the question. Maybe. Or maybe I'm looking for something. Won't know until I find it, I suppose. The wind outside had died to a whisper. Jake peered out of their shelter. Looks clear. We could make Silver Rock by midnight if we push. No. Dust stood. Decision made. Horses are exhausted. People too. There's a good spot to camp about a mile north, protected. Has a spring. Better to arrive fresh in daylight than stumble in half dead. No one argued. They were all too tired, too shaken by the day's events. As they prepared to move, Clara tried to return Dust's coat. Keep it for now, he said. Desert nights are cold, and that fancy cloak of yours won't do much good. They made camp under a sky washed clean by the storm. True to Dust's word. The stars were magnificent, a river of light flowing across the darkness. Clara lay on her bedroll, wrapped in his coat, watching the heavens wheel overhead. Can't sleep? Dust's voice came soft from where he sat on the watch. Too much to think about. He moved closer, sitting cross-legged near her bedroll. Having second thoughts? About what? Marriage, new life, all of it. Clara considered lying, maintaining the facade of certainty she'd worn since leaving Boston. But under the vast honesty of the stars, pretense seemed pointless. Yes, she whispered. I thought I knew what I wanted. Security, respect, a place in society. But out here, she gestured at the immensity around them. It all seems so small. Desert does that. Strips away what doesn't matter, shows you what does. And what matters to you? Dust? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, freedom. Sky above, horse beneath, gun at my side. Not much, but it's mine. It sounds lonely. It is. He turned to look at her, and in the starlight she could see something vulnerable in his eyes. But loneliness you choose is better than a cage, no matter how golden. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. In a few words, he'd named the fear she hadn't been able to voice, that she was trading one cage for another. Poverty for a different kind of imprisonment. I should sleep, she said, voice thick. Tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll meet your banker, start your new life. Dust stood, returning to his watch position. But tonight, Miss Clara, you're free as any soul under these stars. Don't forget that feeling. Might need it someday. She closed her eyes, wrapped in his coat and his words. And for the first time since leaving Boston, Clara Whitfield felt truly alive. Tomorrow would bring choices and consequences. But tonight she had found something she hadn't known she was searching for. A glimpse of paradise in the company of a desert rider who owned nothing but understood everything. The night deepened, wrapping the desert in velvet darkness punctuated by the brilliant scatter of stars. The storm had passed but left the air sharp and clean, carrying the scent of wet sage and distant rain. Clara couldn't sleep, her mind too full of the day's revelations and tomorrow's uncertainties. The others had succumbed to exhaustion. Jake snoring softly by the dying coach fire. The Parkers huddled together under their blankets. Mr. Webb muttering in his dreams about profits and losses. Only Dust remained awake, a silent sentinel against the darkness. Clara rose quietly, still wrapped in his duster, and moved to where he sat on a flat boulder overlooking their camp. He glanced at her but said nothing, shifting slightly to make room. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. Don't sleep much. Desert teaches you to stay alert. He paused. Though truth be told, it's not bandits keeping me awake tonight. They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Clara had never experienced such profound quiet. No city sounds, no clatter of carriages or voices from neighboring houses. Just the soft whisper of wind through rock and the distant call of some night bird. Tell me something, she said eventually. Why do they call you Dust? The real reason. He smiled slightly. Told you, it's all I own. I don't believe you. No. He picked up a handful of sand, letting it sift through his fingers. Maybe it's because I never stay long enough to leave a mark. Blow in, blow out. Nothing left behind but dust. That's sad. That's free. Clara studied his profile in the starlight. The strong jaw, the lines etched by sun and hardship, the eyes that seemed to hold depths of unspoken sorrow. What was her name? He turned sharply. What? The woman who hurt you, made you choose dust over roots. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he laughed, soft and bitter. Margaret, Maggie, ranch owner's daughter up in Colorado. Thought we had something until her father offered her to the man who wanted my land. She chose security over, he shrugged, over whatever we had. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made the practical choice. Can't fault someone for choosing survival. Clara felt the weight of his words, the parallel to her own situation too obvious to ignore. Do you hate her for it? No. Feel sorry for her sometimes. Last I heard, she had everything a woman could want. Fine house, servants, respect. Everything but the right to say no to her husband or choose her own path. He glanced at Clara. Sound familiar? She pulled the coat tighter. Albert's not like that. He's kind, in his way, proper, respectable. I'm sure he is. You don't believe me. I believe you believe it. Dust picked up a stick, poking at the dying embers of their fire. Just wonder if kindness and propriety are enough to build a life on. They're more than I had in Boston. Are they? Clara felt tears threaten. You don't understand. You're a man. You can choose to drift, to own nothing but freedom. What choices do I have? Seamstress living above the shop? Growing old mending other women's finery? Watching the pity in everyone's eyes? At least with Albert, I'll have dignity. Dignity. He tested the word like foreign currency. That what you'll be thinking when he's kissing you? When you're sharing his bed? At least I have dignity. Heat flooded her face. That's inappropriate. Maybe, but it's honest. He turned to face her fully. You're about to pledge your life to a man you don't love. Seems to me that deserves some honest talk. And what would you have me do? The tears came now, hot and unstoppable. Run off into the desert? Become a saloon girl? A farmer's wife scratching at dust? I'd have you know you have choices, even if they're hard ones. His voice gentled. I'd have you not settle for a cage just because it's gilded. Easy for you to say. You've already lost everything. Have I? He reached out, thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. The touch was gentle as his treatment of Jake's wound, but it sent fire through her veins. Seems to me I found something worth more than land or money. Found it sitting beside me under these stars. The space between them crackled with possibility. Clara knew she should move away, return to her bedroll, remember propriety and promises. Instead, she leaned into his touch. We've known each other one day, she whispered. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes you recognize something in another's soul. Like calling to like... His hand cupped her cheek. I look at you and see someone wild as this desert, trying to tame herself for people who'll never understand her true worth. And I look at you and see someone running from the very thing I'm running toward, a place to belong. Maybe we're both running from the wrong things. The night held its breath around them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. The stars burned overhead. Ancient witnesses to countless human dramas played out beneath their light. In the morning, I'll go to Albert. Clara said, I'll put on my mother's dress and become Mrs. Harrington. This is just a moment outside of time. Is it? Dust's thumb traced her jawline. Or is this the only real moment, the only honest one? Clara closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the truth of his words. Here, stripped of society's expectations and tomorrow's obligations, she felt more herself than she'd ever been. The Clara who'd dreamed of adventure before poverty crushed those dreams. The Clara who'd stood at Boston Harbor watching ships depart for unknown shores, wishing she could stow away. I chose a banker's fortune, she said softly, opening her eyes to meet his, yet found paradise in a single night beside a desert rider. The words hung between them, confession and benediction. Dust's eyes darkened with something that made her breath catch. Clara, he said, her name a prayer on his lips. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips were chapped from sun and wind, tasting of coffee and distant rain. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they both feared breaking something fragile. Then his hand tangled in her hair, and she gripped his shirt, and gentleness gave way to desperate hunger. It was nothing like the chaste pecks she'd exchanged with suitors in Boston parlors. This was wild as the storm that had driven them together, deep as the canyons carved by ancient waters. It was acknowledgement of everything they could never have, compressed into a moment that had to last a lifetime. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Clara felt fundamentally changed. Some door inside her had opened that could never fully close again. I should go, she whispered, though every fiber of her being wanted to stay. Should you? His hands framed her face. Clara, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She pulled away, though it felt like tearing her own heart out. I gave my word. My mother's counting on the money I'll send. I can't be like your Maggie, making promises I won't keep. She kept her promises. That was the problem. But he let her go, understanding in his eyes alongside the pain. You're stronger than you know. Clara Whitfield, don't let them break that strength. She stood on unsteady legs, still wrapped in his coat. Keep it, he said when she moved to return it. Something to remember that you once knew what it felt like to be free. Clara made her way back to her bedroll. Every step an agony of separation. She lay down, pressing her face into the collar of his coat, breathing in his scent. Above, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to human heartbreak. She didn't sleep, neither did Dust. She could feel his eyes on her through the remaining hours of darkness, standing guard over more than just their camp. When dawn finally painted the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold, Clara rose, feeling ancient, as if she'd lived a lifetime in one night. The others stirred, grumbling about aches and cold. Jake checked the horses while Mrs. Parker fussed over breakfast preparations. Through it all, Clara and Dust moved in separate spheres, careful not to touch, not to look too long. "Silver Rock's just ahead," Jake announced after they'd broken camp. "Be there in an hour." An hour. Clara felt time slipping through her fingers like desert sand. She climbed into the coach, Dust's coat folded in her lap, trying to armor herself for what was coming. Dust rode alongside again, but distance yawned between them now. Only once did he speak directly to her, as the first buildings of Silver Rock appeared on the horizon. "Remember," he said quietly, "cages can be opened, sometimes from the inside, sometimes from without, but only if the bird remembers it has wings." Then he wheeled his horse around, touching his hat to the others. "This is where I leave you. Safe travels." "Wait," Clara called out before she could stop herself. Will we see you again?" His smile was sad and knowing. "Desert's not that big, Miss Clara. Paths cross when they're meant to." Then he was gone, riding back toward the wild emptiness that was his home, leaving Clara to face her gilded future with only a borrowed coat and the memory of what it felt like to touch paradise. The coach rolled on toward Silver Rock, toward Albert and propriety, and promises that suddenly felt heavy as shackles, but wrapped in the scent of leather and sage. Clara carried with her the knowledge that for one night, she'd been as free as the stars, and somewhere in the vast desert, a lone rider carried the taste of her tears and the echo of her whispered confession. She'd chosen a banker's fortune, yet found paradise in a single night beside a desert rider. The question that remained was whether paradise once tasted could ever be forgotten, or if it would haunt her through all the proper, respectable years to come. The desert surrendered its grip on them gradually as they descended toward Silver Rock. Gone were the twisted rock formations and endless vistas, replaced by signs of civilization, fence posts, cattle trails, the distant smoke of homesteads. But nature wasn't finished with them yet. They were perhaps 3 miles from town when Jake pulled up sharp, studying the sky with worried eyes. "That don't look good." Clara leaned out the window, following his gaze. Dark clouds were building over the mountains, but these weren't the red walls of a sandstorm. These were black and green tinged, pregnant with violence. "Storm coming," Jake muttered. And fast, as if his words had summoned it. The wind picked up, carrying the metallic scent of rain. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by a rumble that Clara felt in her bones. "Should we race for town, Mr.?" Webb asked nervously. "No good. It'll hit before we make it." Jake scanned the landscape. "There, that outcropping. Best shelter we'll find." They barely made it. The storm struck with primordial fury, just as Jake guided the horses into the lee of a massive rock formation. Rain didn't fall. It hammered down in sheets that turned the desert floor to instant rivers. Lightning split the sky in blinding forks. Thunder following so close it seemed the very mountains were breaking apart. Clara huddled with the others in the coach, but water found every gap, soaking them within minutes. The horses screamed in terror, and Jake struggled to control them. Then, through the chaos, came a familiar voice shouting commands. Dust materialized from the storm like some ancient god of the desert, water streaming from his hat, his horse dancing but obedient to his will. "The wash," he yelled at Jake. "Get them to higher ground! Flash flood coming!" Clara heard it then, a roar building beneath the storm's fury. Jake whipped the horses, and they lurched forward, Dust guiding them up a steep slope. They'd barely crested the rise when the flood hit. where moments before had been dry sand. A wall of brown water rushed past, carrying debris, cacti, even small boulders in its violent embrace. The coach teetered dangerously as the ground beneath turned to mud. "Everyone out," Dust commanded. "Coach is too heavy." They scrambled into the deluge. Clara gasped as the cold rain hit her full force, plastering her dress to her body, turning her carefully pinned hair into streaming ropes. Dust was suddenly there, lifting her bodily from the coach, carrying her to a cluster of rocks that offered minimal shelter. "You came back," she said through chattering teeth. "Saw the storm building. Knew Jake would try to push through." He was already moving, helping the others to safety, working with Jake to secure the terrified horses. They huddled together as nature unleashed its fury. Clara had thought the sandstorm was terrifying, but this was worse. The very air seemed to crackle with electricity, and the roar of water below reminded them how quickly the desert could turn deadly. "My merchandise, mister," Webb moaned, watching the floodwaters rise. "Better than your life." "Mrs.," Parker said sharply. Dust returned, somehow producing a tarp from his saddlebags that he rigged as a partial shelter. It wasn't much, but it helped. He pulled Clara against his side, sharing his warmth. Propriety seemed absurd in the face of survival. "How long?" she asked. "Desert storms are violent but quick. An hour, maybe less." She pressed closer, feeling his heart beat steady against the chaos. "You keep saving us. Maybe I'm saving myself." The storm raged on, but gradually its fury spent itself. The lightning moved off. The rain softened from assault to mere downpour, finally to drizzle. As quickly as it had formed, the flood began to recede, leaving a transformed landscape in its wake. Where before had been dusty ground, now mud and pooled water reflected the emerging sun. Desert flowers, dormant until touched by rain, began to open in brilliant bursts of color. The very air smelled different, alive, green, full of possibility. "It's beautiful," Clara breathed. "Deserts like that," Dust said. "Looks dead until the rain comes. Then you see what was waiting underneath all along." She looked at him, wondering if he understood the metaphor he'd just spoken. His eyes met hers, dark with meaning, and she knew he did. "We should move," Jake called. "Town'll be worried after a storm like that." They returned to the coach, now mired hub-deep in mud. It took all of them working together to free it, Clara hiking up her ruined skirts to push alongside the men. By the time they got moving again, they were all mud-splattered and exhausted. But something had changed. The shared ordeal had bonded them. Even Mr. Webb seemed less pompous, helping Mrs. Parker navigate the slippery ground, and Dust no longer held himself separate, riding close, part of their small band of survivors. "Look at us," Clara laughed, catching sight of her reflection in a pool. "I look like a drowned rat." "You look alive," Dust corrected. Maybe for the first time. She considered her mud-stained dress, her hair hanging in wet strings, her face bare of powder or artifice. He was right. She'd never felt more herself. "Albert will be horrified," she said, but found she didn't care. "Then he's a fool." They were approaching Silver Rock now, its buildings solidifying from distant shapes to real structures. Clara could see the church steeple, the bank that would become her world, the hotel where she'd presumably stay until the wedding. "I'll leave you here," Dust said, as they reached the town's edge. "No." The word came out fiercer than Clara intended. "You've saved us 3 times. The least we can do is see you get a hot meal and dry clothes." "Clara, I insist." She met his eyes steadily. "Please." He nodded slowly. "1 meal. Then I go." The town was in chaos from the storm. Streets ran like rivers, and people worked frantically to salvage flood damage. Their bedraggled group attracted attention, especially Dust's presence. "That's McCall," someone whispered. "What's he doing here?" "Bold as brass, riding in like he owns the place." Clara heard the whispers, saw the mix of fear and resentment in the townspeople's faces. Whatever Dust's history with Silver Rock, it wasn't pleasant. They stopped at the hotel, where a flustered clerk took in their muddy appearance with dismay. "Miss Whitfield, Mr. Harrington's been beside himself. He expected you yesterday. We were delayed by bandits and storms." Clara said, "These people saved my life. They'll need rooms, baths, and meals." "I don't need," Dust began. "Yes, you do." She turned back to the clerk. "Charge everything to Mr. Harrington's account. I'm sure he'll want to reward those who protected his fiancée." The clerk's eyes darted between Clara and Dust, clearly recognizing the latter and just as clearly not wanting to challenge a future Harrington. "Of course, Miss, I'll prepare rooms." In the hotel parlor, as they waited for accommodations, the Parkers and Mr. Webb shared the tale of their adventures with other guests. Clara noticed how Dust positioned himself near the door, ready to bolt at the first sign of real trouble. "Relax," she murmured. "No one's going to arrest you for saving lives. You'd be surprised what they'll arrest me for in this town." Before she could ask what he meant, a commotion at the door announced a new arrival. Albert Harrington strode in, impeccable despite the storm, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his calculating eyes. "Clara, my dear, I've been frantic." He crossed to her, taking in her disheveled state with poorly concealed dismay. What on earth happened? She found herself comparing him to Dust Albert's soft hands that had never known hard labor, his clean clothes that spoke of a life lived indoors, his careful words chosen for effect rather than honesty. "We were attacked by bandits, then caught in 2 storms," she said. "If not for Mr. McCall, I doubt I'd be standing here." Albert's eyes found Dust, and something cold flickered across his face. "McCall, I'd heard you were haunting the territories again." "Harrington," Dust's voice was carefully neutral. "Just passing through, as you always are." Albert's smile was sharp, never staying long enough to face consequences, or to let them catch up. The 2 men stared at each other, a history of conflict evident in their stance. Clara felt the tension ratchet up, saw hands drift toward weapons around the room. "Perhaps," she said loudly, "we could all use those baths and clean clothes. Mr. McCall, you must be exhausted after everything you've done for us." "I'm fine, Miss Clara," but his eyes softened as they met hers. "Though I appreciate the kindness." "Kindness." Albert's voice carried an edge. "Yes, we must reward kindness, mustn't we? Though I wonder at the price some kindnesses carry. The only payment I need is knowing these folks are safe." Dust said, "Now, if you'll excuse me, stay." Clara surprised herself with the command. "Please, you saved my life. The least we can do is ensure you're properly thanked." Albert's jaw tightened, but faced with Clara's public insistence and the grateful testimony of the other passengers, he had little choice but to play gracious host. "Of course, Mr. McCall must be properly thanked." The pause before the last word carried weight. "I'll have the sheriff. I'll ensure you have everything you need." As they dispersed to their rooms, Dust caught Clara's arm gently. "This is a mistake. I should go." "Why? What is this between you and Albert?" "Old business. Nothing to do with you." "Everything here has to do with me now." She searched his face. "What happened between you 2? He wanted something I had, I wouldn't sell. He found other ways to take it." Dust's smile was bitter. "Same old story, just different chapters. Your ranch? Water rights near here, best spring for 50 miles. Funny how the deed got contested just when he decided to expand his holdings." Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "He wouldn't he?" Dust touched her cheek gently. "You're a good woman. Clara, don't let this place change that." Then he was gone, leaving Clara standing in the hallway, torn between the man she'd promised to marry and the one who'd shown her what it meant to be free. Outside, the desert bloomed in the storm's wake, proof that even the harshest ground could hide paradise, waiting for the right conditions to reveal itself. Clara thought of Dust's words about things waiting underneath, and wondered what might bloom in her own heart if she had the courage to let the storms come. But first, she had to face Albert, explain her muddy dress and tangled hair, and the way her eyes kept searching for a dust-covered stranger who wore his exile like armor. She had to pretend that 3 days in the desert hadn't changed everything, hadn't shown her that the fortune she'd chosen might cost more than she'd ever imagined. The storm had passed, but Clara suspected the real tempest was just beginning. Silver Rock revealed itself to Clara like a deck of marked cards, everything gleaming on the surface while shadows lurked beneath. After a hot bath and fresh clothes, she found herself in Albert's parlor, a space that spoke of wealth and power with its imported furniture and heavy drapes that shut out the desert's wild beauty. "You must be exhausted, my dear," Albert said, pouring brandy for himself while offering her tea. His movements were precise, controlled. Everything Dust's weren't. Such an ordeal, when I think what might have happened. But it didn't. Clara said, "Thanks to Mr. McCall." Albert's hand paused minutely on the decanter. Yes, how fortuitous that he happened to be passing by. McCall has always had impeccable timing. You speak as if you suspect him of something. I suspect him of many things. Albert settled into his leather chair, studying her over his glass. "The man is a drifter. Clara, a gunfighter who operates outside the law's boundaries. That he helped you is admirable, but it doesn't change what he is. And what is that? Dangerous. To himself and others." Albert leaned forward. "Do you know why he can't enter most towns without watching for the sheriff? He's killed men. Clara, many men. In self-defense, I'd wager. Perhaps not. The dead can't testify to their intentions." He set down his glass. "I'm grateful he helped you, truly, but now he needs to move on, before his presence causes trouble." Clara thought of the whispers she'd heard, the way people had shrunk back when Dust entered the hotel. He saved 4 lives. Albert, surely that counts for something. In a perfect world, yes, but Silver Rock isn't perfect. It's a town built on order, prosperity, and knowing one's place. Men like McCall upset that balance. Because he wouldn't sell you his water rights? Albert's eyes sharpened. "He told you about that. He mentioned it." "Of course he did." Albert's laugh was humorless. "Did he mention he was squatting on that land, that his deed was forged, that he threatened the surveyor I sent to verify boundaries?" "That's not—" Clara stopped. How did she know what was true? She'd known Dust 3 days. Albert, 3 months. "You doubt me?" Albert's voice carried hurt. "Clara, I've been nothing but honest with you. I've offered you a future, security, respect. What has McCall offered except dangerous adventures and pretty words under stars?" Heat flooded her cheeks. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" He moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. His fingers were soft, manicured, so different from Dust's calloused grip. "You think people didn't notice how you two looked at each other? How he touched your face in the street? I'm not a fool. Clara, nothing improper happened. I believe you. You're too good, too moral to betray a promise." He squeezed her hand. "But I also know how such men operate. They see something beautiful, something refined, and they want to pull it down to their level, make it as tarnished as they are." Clara jerked her hand away. "That's not—" "Isn't it? Look at yourself. Clara, 3 days ago you were a lady. Today you rode into town covered in mud, hair loose like a saloon girl, defending a gunfighter. Is that the influence you want in our life?" "Our life." The words sat heavy between them. Clara rose, moving to the window. Outside, she could see the desert stretching endlessly. All that wildness pressed against the edge of civilization like a living thing trying to break in. "The wedding," Albert said behind her. "I think we should move it up. This Sunday, perhaps. No need for a long engagement. Not when we've already wasted so much time." "That's only 4 days." "Time enough. Your dress survived the journey, didn't it? The church is ready. What else do we need?" "Love," Clara thought but didn't say. Instead, she nodded. "If that's what you think best." "I do." He joined her at the window, his reflection overlaying the desert view. You'll see. Clara, once you're settled, once you're truly part of Silver Rock, all this wildness will seem like a fever dream. You'll wonder why you ever thought there was beauty in all that emptiness. After leaving Albert's house, Clara walked the streets of Silver Rock, trying to see her future home clearly. The storm had left puddles that reflected the sky, but already the desert was reclaiming them, drinking the water back into itself. The town was larger than she'd expected. 2 banks, 3 saloons, a mercantile, hotel, church, and sheriff's office. Houses ranged from modest adobes to Albert's mansion on the hill. People nodded respectfully when they recognized her as Harrington's fiancée, but she caught other expressions too: pity, warning, resignation. At the mercantile, she overheard 2 women talking. Another lamb for the slaughter. How many wives has Harrington gone through now? Just the one, but she didn't last long. Delicate constitution. They said, delicate constitution or broken spirit? They hushed when they saw Clara, bustling away with guilty looks. Outside the sheriff's office, she encountered a different kind of talk. Sheriff Daniels, a heavy man with cruel eyes, was holding court with his deputies. McCall's back in town. Saw him at the hotel, bold as brass. Want us to run him out, Sheriff? Not yet. Let him think he's safe. Man like that always makes a mistake eventually. Daniels spat tobacco juice. Besides, Harrington wants to handle this personal, like something about the man disrespecting his woman. Clara's blood chilled. She hurried on. But everywhere she went, the talk was the same. Dust's presence was a disruption, a challenge to the order Albert and men like him had built. Near sunset, she found herself at the livery stable, drawn by some instinct she couldn't name. Dust was there, tending his horse with the careful attention of a man who knew his life might depend on his mount's condition. "You shouldn't be here," he said without turning. "Neither should you. The whole town's talking. Let them talk." He continued brushing his horse. "I'll be gone come morning." "Where will you go? Does it matter?" Clara moved closer, breathing in the familiar sense of hay and leather. "It matters to me." He finally faced her, and she saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes. "It shouldn't. You've got a life to build here, a respectable life with a man who can give you everything. Everything except honesty. Albert says you threatened a surveyor, says your deed was forged." Dust laughed bitterly. "That what he says? Interesting how history gets rewritten by those who win. Then tell me your version." He studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. "My deed was real as any piece of paper can be. Bought that land fair from an old Mexican who'd held it since before the territory was American. But Mexican deeds don't count for much when a white banker wants the water. As for the surveyor," his jaw tightened. "Man came with 3 armed guards, ready to take what they couldn't buy. I encouraged them to reconsider. With your gun, with my presence, never drew, didn't need to. But men like that, they don't like being face down. Makes them mean." He returned to his horse. Week later, sheriff shows up with a warrant. Seems my deed had irregularities. Judge Harrington's poker buddy agreed. I could fight it in court with money I didn't have, or I could drift. So you drifted. Been drifting ever since. He patted his horse's neck. "Just me and Whisper here, free as the wind and twice as lonely." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "It's not right. Lot of things aren't right. Doesn't mean they don't happen." He moved past her toward the stable door. "You should get back. Be dark soon, and your fiancé won't like you being here." "I don't care what he likes." "You should." Dust paused at the door. "He's not a man to cross, Clara. He gets what he wants, one way or another. And right now, he wants you. I'm not property to be claimed. Aren't you?" His eyes were infinitely sad. "You're wearing his ring, living in his town, about to take his name. Sounds like a claim to me." Clara looked down at the engagement ring, a massive diamond that caught the dying light. It was worth more than her mother would see in a lifetime, yet it felt heavier than shackles. He moved the wedding to Sunday. Dust went very still. "That soon? He says there's no point waiting." "He's right. Every day you wait is another day you might come to your senses." He turned back to her. Is that what you want? To marry him? The question hung between them. Simple and impossible. Clara opened her mouth to say yes, of course. She'd given her word. Instead, what came out was, I want to matter. I want my life to mean something beyond mending seams and dodging creditors. Is that so wrong? No, but there's different kinds of meaning. He moved closer, and she caught that familiar scent of leather and sage. You could matter to one man's bank account, one town's social ladder, or you could matter to yourself, to the life you choose instead of the one chosen for you. Easy for you to say. You're free. Am I? He touched her cheek, the gesture achingly gentle. I own nothing but dust. Clara, can't enter most towns without watching my back. I sleep under stars because no roof will have me. That's not freedom, that's exile. Then why choose it? Because it's my exile. My choice. His thumb traced her jawline. Just like this marriage is your choice. Just make sure you're choosing for the right reasons. A shout from the street broke the moment. Sheriff Daniels and 2 deputies were approaching, hands near their guns. Evening, McCall, Daniels drawled. Heard you were visiting. Thought I'd remind you about our town ordinances regarding undesirable elements. I'm not armed, Dust said, raising his hands slightly to show his empty holsters. Smart man. Still, might be best if you moved along. Wouldn't want any misunderstandings. Clara stepped forward. Mr. McCall is a hero. Sheriff. He saved 4 lives, including mine. That's admirable, Miss Whitfield, but past good deeds don't erase current realities. Daniel's pig eyes fixed on her. Mr. Harrington know you're here? The threat was subtle but clear. Clara lifted her chin. I'll be sure to tell him how helpful you've been. The sheriff's face darkened, but he backed off. Just remember, McCall, Sunrise, don't let it find you here. After they left, Dust shook his head. You just made an enemy. I've been making those since I arrived. Apparently. This isn't Boston. Clara, enemies here don't just cut you at parties. They cut you proper. Then maybe I should leave too. Run like you did. No. The word came fierce. Don't you run. Don't let them make you into me. He gripped her shoulders. You fight for the life you want, but fight smart, from inside the walls, not outside them. And if the life I want isn't inside any walls. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest. For a moment they stood like that, holding each other in the gathering dark while the town that wanted them apart pressed in from all sides. Then God help us both, he whispered into her hair, because wanting what we can't have is the surest way to madness I know. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it the sound of hammers on wood. They were building a gallows in the town square. Clara pressed her face to the hotel window, watching in horror as the structure took shape. Below, Sheriff Daniels supervised with obvious satisfaction. A knock at her door made her heart leap. She found Jake, the stagecoach driver, hat in hand. Miss Clara, you need to know something. They arrested Dust last night. What? On what charges? That bandit attack on our coach? They're saying he was part of it, that he only saved us to throw off suspicion. Clara's knees went weak. That's absurd. We all saw. Don't matter what we saw. The surviving bandit won with the wounded hand. He's saying Dust planned the whole thing. Of course, he's also getting a reduced sentence for testifying. This is Albert's doing. The words came out flat. Certain. Jake shifted uncomfortably. Can't say, miss, but the trial's set for this afternoon. Judge Hamilton's presiding. Albert's poker friend. Like I said, can't say. Jake met her eyes. But if someone wanted to help, they'd need to move fast. Man could hang by sunset. After Jake left, Clara dressed with shaking hands. The wedding dress hung in her wardrobe like a ghost, but she turned away from it. There were more pressing matters than her own fate. The town was buzzing with excitement. A hanging was entertainment in a place starved for diversions. Clara pushed through the crowds, ignoring the whispers that followed her. At the jail, Deputy Morrison, younger and less hardened than his colleagues, stood guard. "I need to see him," Clara said. "Can't do that. Miss Sheriff's orders. Please." She touched his arm gently. "He saved my life. I just need 5 minutes." The deputy glanced around nervously. "Sheriff's at breakfast. 5 minutes. No more." The jail was dim, smelling of unwashed bodies and despair. Dust sat in the furthest cell, somehow managing to look undefeated despite the chains. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but his eyes drank her in like a man dying of thirst. "They're saying you planned the robbery." "I know." He smiled grimly. "Clever frame. Uses the truth that I knew those men and twists it. We'll testify. All of us who were on that coach. Against the word of a confessed bandit who's getting leniency for cooperating? Against a judge who owes Harrington money?" He shook his head. "This was always going to happen. Clara, the moment I rode into town, my fate was sealed." "No." She gripped the bars. "There has to be something." "There is." His hands covered hers through the iron. "You can walk away. Marry Harrington. Live your life. Forget you ever met a desert drifter who couldn't keep his hands on what was his. Stop it. Stop acting like you're already dead." "Aren't I?" His eyes burned into hers. "Men like me don't get happy endings. Clara, we get rope or lead, and that's if we're lucky. Then why did you stay? You could have been miles away by dawn." His hands tightened on hers. "You know why." The deputy coughed. "Time's up, miss." Clara pulled away reluctantly. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Dust's voice was gentle but final. "Don't throw away your future for a past that was never meant to be." Outside the jail, Clara's mind raced. She needed help. But who in Silver Rock would stand against Albert Harrington? Then she remembered the Parkers, Mr. Webb, even Jake. They all owed Dust their lives. She found them at the hotel, already conferring in hushed tones. "It's a travesty." "Mr. Parker said, "That boy saved us all." "Then help me save him," Clara said. They looked at each other uncertainly. "How?" Mrs. Parker asked. "We're strangers here. No influence, no power. But you have truth, and there has to be someone in this town who values that over politics." "The minister," Jake suggested slowly. "Reverend Thomas. He's been known to speak out against injustice. Of course, he also performs weddings for Harrington, so it's a start." Clara gathered her courage. "Will you come with me?" One by one. They nodded. It wasn't much of an army, but it was something. Reverend Thomas was a thin, aesthetic man who listened to their story with growing concern. "This is troubling indeed, but the law's being twisted." Clara interrupted. "You know it. Reverend, how many times has Silver Rock's law bent to serve those in power?" "More than I care to count," he admitted. "But what would you have me do?" "Speak at the trial. Remind people what justice really means. That bearing false witness is a sin as grave as any other." The Reverend studied her for a long moment. "You care deeply for this man." Heat flooded her cheeks. "He saved my life, and perhaps more than that." His smile was sad but knowing. "I'll speak, Miss Whitfield. But speeches rarely change predetermined outcomes." The trial was held in the saloon, the only building large enough for the crowd. Judge Hamilton, a florid man who sweated whiskey, presided with obvious boredom. This was all for show. The verdict was already decided. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced man named Stillwater, laid out the case with practiced ease. The bandit, one Tom Mason, testified that Dust had planned everything, that the rescue was staged to throw off suspicion. "Why would he do that?" Clara called out from the gallery, unable to contain herself. "Order!" Hamilton banged his gavel. "The defendant's woman will remain silent or be removed." "I'm not his woman," Clara said, standing. "I'm Albert Harrington's fiancée, and I'm telling you this is a lie." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hamilton's face darkened. "Sit down, Miss Whitfield, or I'll hold you in contempt. Then hold me in contempt. At least I'll be in honest company." The courtroom erupted. Hamilton banged his gavel repeatedly, while Stillwater demanded Clara's removal. But she wasn't alone. The Parkers stood too. Then Jake, then Webb. Even some townspeople rose, those who'd benefited from Dust's past interventions. "This is a lynching, not a trial." Reverend Thomas's voice cut through the chaos. "Where is the evidence beyond the word of a criminal seeking leniency? Where are the character witnesses for a man who's saved dozens of lives over the years?" "Character?" Stillwater sneered. "McCall is a gunfighter, a drifter, a man who lives outside the law, and yet inside his own code." Thomas countered, "Which is more than can be said for some who claim respectability." The tide was turning. Clara could feel it in the crowd's energy, see it in Hamilton's increasing desperation. Then Albert entered, and the room fell silent. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "and ladies, perhaps we're being too hasty. After all, Mr. McCall did save my fiancée's life. Surely that counts for something." Clara stared at him, trying to read the game. Albert never gave without taking twice over. "I propose a compromise." Albert continued. "Mr. McCall leaves Silver Rock immediately and never returns. In exchange, charges are dropped. Justice is served without unnecessary bloodshed." "That's not justice," Clara said. "That's exile for a crime he didn't commit. Better than hanging for one he didn't commit." Albert replied. His eyes found hers, cold and possessive. "Wouldn't you agree, my dear?" Dust spoke for the first time. "I accept." "No?" Clara turned to him. "You can't." "I accept," he repeated, his eyes never leaving hers. "On one condition. Miss Whitfield walks me to the town limits, alone, to ensure no accidents happen along the way." Albert's jaw clenched, but faced with the crowd's shifting mood, he had little choice. "Agreed." They unchained Dust and returned his weapons. The crowd parted as he walked through, Clara at his side. She was aware of every eye on them, every whisper. But she didn't care. These might be her last moments with him. At the stable, he saddled Whisper with economical movements. Neither spoke until they were beyond the buildings, following the road into open desert. "You shouldn't have done that," Dust said finally. Standing up in court, "You've made enemies." "I already had enemies. At least now I've made them honestly." He smiled at that, the expression transforming his weather-beaten face. "You're something else. Clara Whitfield. Like a wildcat in a parlor dress. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Highest one I know." They'd reached the town marker. Beyond lay the desert, vast and free and empty. "This is far enough." "Dust, James," he corrected. "My name is James. Want you to know that, to remember it." "James?" The name felt intimate on her lips. "Where will you go?" "West, always west. Maybe California, maybe Oregon, somewhere the past can't follow." "Take me with you." The words hung between them, shocking in their honesty. Dust, James, went very still. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" Clara stepped closer. "What's keeping me here? A loveless marriage? A life of proper misery? At least with you. I'd be honestly alive instead of respectably dead." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You think that now. But what about when winter comes and we're sleeping in snow? When your hands are cracked from work and your dress is patches on patches? When people look at you like trash because you chose a drifter over a banker? Then I'll know I chose for love instead of fear." "Clara, I love you." The words came out fierce, desperate. "I've known you 3 days and I love you more than I could ever love Albert in 3 lifetimes. That has to count for something." His control broke. He pulled her against him, kissing her with all the desperate passion of a condemned man granted reprieve. She responded with equal fervor, pouring all her fear and hope and impossible love into that moment. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, she saw tears on his face. "I love you too," he said. "God help me, I do, which is why I can't take you with me." He pressed something into her hand, a small silver compass. "So you can always find your way, even when the path seems lost. James, please, live your life, Clara, but live it awake. Don't let them tame the wildcat." He swung up onto whisper. And if someday you find yourself free, really free, well, the desert's not that big. Paths cross when they're meant to. Then he was riding away, figure growing smaller against the vast canvas of sand and sky. Clara stood there until he disappeared into the heat shimmer, her tears falling onto the thirsty ground. Behind her, Silver Rock waited with its gallows and gossip, its proper marriages and hollow promises. Ahead stretched the desert, beautiful and terrible and honest in its indifference. Clara looked down at the compass in her hand, its needle pointing steadily west. Somewhere out there, a man named James McCall rode toward freedom, carrying her heart with him. And somewhere in the depths of her soul, a wildcat began to pace its cage, testing the bars, waiting for the moment when choosing love over fear would no longer be just a dream whispered in the desert wind. The church bells rang hollow in the desert air, calling Silver Rock to witness what everyone assumed was inevitable, the marriage of Clara Whitfield to Albert Harrington. But Clara stood in her hotel room, staring at her mother's wedding dress, feeling as if she were preparing for her own funeral. 3 days had passed since James rode west. 3 days of Albert's increasingly possessive attention, of townspeople's knowing looks, of lying awake clutching a silver compass and wondering if courage meant staying or leaving. A knock interrupted her reverie. Mrs. Parker entered, her face grave. "My dear, there's something you should know. My husband overheard Albert with Sheriff Daniels last night. They're planning to track Mr. McCall. Albert says he won't rest until there's no chance of him returning." Clara's blood ran cold. "James is 3 days gone. Surely they have trackers, men who know the desert like wolves know prey." "Mrs." Parker gripped Clara's hands. "I couldn't stand before my maker knowing I hadn't warned you." Clara stared at the wedding dress, her mind racing. If she married Albert, she'd be complicit in whatever happened to James. If she ran, Albert's wounded pride would guarantee pursuit. But there was a third option. "Mrs. Parker, will you help me?" An hour later, Clara stood before Albert in his study, wearing not her wedding dress but her traveling clothes. "What's the meaning of this?" Albert's voice was dangerously quiet. "I can't marry you." She set his ring on the desk. "I'm sorry, Albert, but I won't live a lie." "A lie?" He rose slowly. "I've offered you everything. Wealth, position, security, everything but love. And I've realized that's the only currency that matters." His face darkened. "This is about McCall. This is about me, about choosing the life I want rather than the one I'm supposed to want. You little fool." Albert's control cracked. "Do you think you can just walk away? That I'll let you humiliate me in front of the entire town? I think you're a practical man who values his reputation. Which will suffer more, a broken engagement or forcing a woman to the altar?" "You underestimate me." He moved closer, and Clara smelled whiskey on his breath. "I own this town. One word from me and you'll find every door closed, every road blocked. Where will you go? Back to Boston? With what money?" Clara lifted her chin. "Then I'll work. I'll scrub floors if I have to, but I'll do it as a free woman." "Free?" Albert laughed bitterly. "You think McCall represents freedom? He's a ghost. Clara, a man with no future, no home, nothing but a gun and a horse. Is that the life you want? The life I want is my own to choose. Then choose carefully." His voice dropped to a threat. "Because if you walk out that door, you're not just leaving me. You're declaring war. And I promise you, my dear, it's a war you cannot win." Clara met his gaze steadily. "We'll see." She walked out, spine straight, though her knees shook. In the street, she found unexpected allies. Reverend Thomas stood with the Parkers and several townspeople she'd seen rise during the trial. "Miss Whitfield," the Reverend said, "we've been discussing your situation. Silver Rock may be Harrington's town, but not everyone here is his creature." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's a teaching position at the mission school. It doesn't pay much, but it includes lodging. If you're willing to stay and fight for the town's soul rather than flee, Clara looked around at these people, strangers who'd become allies because they'd witnessed truth prevail, however briefly, over power. Then she looked west, where somewhere James rode free and hunted. "I need to warn someone first," she said. Then, "Yes, I'll stay." Jake appeared with a saddled horse. "Figured you might need this, that compass you keep touching. It's pointing west, ain't it?" Clara hugged the old driver. "Thank you. Just remember, miss, sometimes the bravest thing is to build something new rather than chase something lost." Clara rode hard, following the western road. She'd studied the maps in Albert's office, knew the waterholes and likely routes. If the trackers were 3 days behind James, and she could find him first. The desert embraced her like an old friend now. She'd learned its moods in those few days of travel, understood why James found peace in its vast honesty. As night fell, she made camp at a spring Jake had described, building her fire in the shelter of red rocks. She thought she was alone until a voice came from the darkness. "That's a good way to get shot, riding up on a man's camp without announcing yourself. James!" She whirled to find him emerging from the shadows, gun lowered. "How?" "Saw your dust trail hours ago. Figured it was trackers. Circled back." His face was a mix of joy and anguish. "Clara, what are you doing here?" "Warning you. Albert sent men." "I know. Spotted them yesterday." He moved into the firelight, and she saw new lines of exhaustion on his face. "Been leading them in circles, wearing out their horses. But Clara, you shouldn't be here. This isn't your fight, isn't it?" She stood, facing him. "I broke our engagement, publicly. The whole town knows." His eyes widened. "You what?" "I chose love over fear." She pulled out the compass. "And it led me here." "Clara," his voice broke. "Do you know what you've done? Albert won't let this stand. You'll be marked, ostracized. Free." She moved closer. "Reverend Thomas offered me a teaching position. Others are standing with me. Silver Rock doesn't have to belong to men like Albert. It can be better." "You're staying? In town?" Someone has to prove that bullies don't always win." She touched his face. "But first, we deal with the trackers." He caught her hand. "We? Did you think I'd warn you and leave? We're in this together now. James McCall, for better or worse." He pulled her against him, and for a moment they just held each other, two souls finding anchor in the vast emptiness. Then he pulled back. "All business. 3 men, good trackers but city soft. They're camped about 5 miles east, horses near played out." A smile ghosted across his face. "Might be they'll wake up to find their mounts mysteriously untied and scattered. Take them days to round them up, giving you time to disappear. Giving us time to decide." He cupped her face. "Clara, I can't ask you to throw away a respectable life. You're not asking, I'm choosing." She kissed him softly. "But I'm not choosing to run. Not anymore." They talked through the night, planning and dreaming in equal measure. James would go to California, establish himself legitimately, find work that didn't involve his gun. Clara would teach, build alliances, slowly change Silver Rock from within. They'd write, carefully, through Reverend Thomas, and someday, when the ground was prepared, "I'll come back," James promised as dawn painted the eastern sky. "However long it takes, I'll come back for you. And I'll be waiting, but not passively. I'll be building something worth coming back to." They scattered the trackers' horses as planned, then rode back toward Silver Rock together. At the town limits, they paused. "This isn't goodbye," Clara said firmly. "It's just until we meet again." Until we meet again. James kissed her one last time, pouring promise into the contact. "Stay wild. Teacher lady, don't let them tame that spirit. Stay free, desert rider, but remember you have something to come home to now." He touched his hat and rode west, but this time Clara didn't watch until he disappeared. Instead, she turned, whisper he'd insisted she keep his horse toward town. She had work to do. The wedding dress still hung in her hotel room, ghostly in the morning light. Clara carefully folded it back into tissue paper. Perhaps someday she'd wear it, but it would be on her terms. To marry a man who saw her as partner, not possession. She pinned up her hair, squared her shoulders, and went to meet Reverend Thomas about the teaching position. Behind her, Albert's mansion squatted on its hill like a spider in its web. Let him plot. She had her own plans now. That evening, as she prepared lessons for children who'd never been taught that the world could be wider than Silver Rock's boundaries, Clara pulled out paper and pen. She had a letter to write, the first of many that would cross the desert like promises on the wind. "My dearest James," she began. "Today I taught my first class. Tomorrow I'll teach another. Each small mind opened is a victory against those who would keep us all in darkness. The desert taught me to see clearly, but you taught me to see hopefully. Wait for me, as I wait for you. Not in stillness, but in purpose, building the life we'll share when the time is right." Outside her window, the desert stretched endlessly under stars. Somewhere out there, a man rode toward a new beginning. Here in Silver Rock, a woman planted seeds of change. They'd chosen the harder path love held in trust rather than seized in haste. But as Clara had learned in those transformative days, the most difficult journeys often led to the most beautiful destinations. The desert had taught her one final lesson. Paradise wasn't a place you found. It was a life you built, one choice at a time, with someone who saw your wild heart and loved it not in spite of its freedom, but because of it. And so Clara Whitfield, who'd come west seeking security, found something infinitely more valuable herself. The banker's fortune she'd refused, but the paradise discovered in a desert rider's arms, that she'd carry forever, compass true, pointing always toward hope. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. We'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel From Wild West for more stories of love, adventure, and the untamed American frontier. What did you think of Clara's choice? Would you have stayed to fight or ridden off into the sunset? Share your thoughts with us.